Hey, it's Chris. Today, I just want to give you a breakdown of which MacBook Pro model I'm going to be buying, along with the specs and my decisions about why, what I'm upgrading from, why I'm upgrading to this one instead of what came out before or instead of waiting. And I know I'm a little bit behind here. This thing's been well reviewed, well covered at this point, but I just want to give you some insight into what I'm doing and why. Now, this being a MacBook Pro, the main reason that I even have one is really for my video editing. Now, I know it's gonna be different for different types of professionals. Some people are developers, some people are designers, some people are CAD artists, and the list goes on. Some people just wanna buy the best MacBook Pro because they want like a Ferrari sitting on their desk, and they just like that. I don't know if you guys saw my video breaking down the difference between the Pro and the Max chips and helping you decide which one you might need. But the main benefit for me is actually being able to speed up my workflow significantly, because there are times when I apply some filters and some effects. And one example would be when I apply optical flow in Final Cut Pro to slow down some footage beyond what it was shot at, the frame rate, and then intersperse some extra frames to try to make it look smooth, stabilize that. On my 2018 MacBook Pro, it's a 16-inch, that really bogs down the system. And it was a pretty maxed out, beefed up MacBook Pro at the time. I mean, there are times when I just need to let it sit for a little bit and crunch through, and that's only at 4K, by the way. I'm not even editing in 8K at the moment, and let it just crunch and then come back. And then there's the exporting times. That can take a while, especially when I've got the full multicam setup going with like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or more cameras plus B-roll on top of that. You know, things can bog down a little bit. So that's why I'm upgrading from my 2018 to this new model, and I am gonna go for the Max, and I realize the shipping times are ridiculous right now, which is unfortunate. So by the time I actually get this reviewed and talk more about it, it's gonna be a while. I will tell you this, outside of video editing, one thing that I do quite a bit of is write, and I'm going to look very much forward to using Jarvis, my favorite AI writing assistant, with the new MacBook Pro. It's not that you can't use Jarvis on any other Mac, even the low-end Macs, it's just that's something that I do. So I do like to type on there. And when I do it, it'll be with Jarvis. If you're new to Jarvis, you haven't seen the amazing things that it does, then I'll leave a link for you so you can check it out. The interesting thing here though is that I'm gonna be ordering the 14-inch, not the 16-inch. Had the 16-inch, really liked it, but it was so big. And I realized I mostly use it at my desk. There are times when I need to be portable and I'm traveling or I'm going to a coffee shop or something, less in the last year or so. You know, when I'm at the desk, I can just hook it up to a monitor and have a big screen experience that way. You guys know I love that 49-inch ultra wide that's been featured on the channel so much that unfortunately met an untimely demise, had to get recycled at Best Buy. So I'm looking at, you know, maybe do I want to get another one, or am I gonna want to get Apple's display or some other display? But the 14-inch is really appealing to me this year. And the way that I arrived at wanting that 14-inch over the 16-inch, number one was messing around with my wife's MacBook, which is much, much smaller than my 16-inch. And every time I interact with it, I'm like, wow, this is so light and nice. And I would love to have as much power as I can with this Max MacBook Pro, but in a smaller form factor so that when I am portable, you know, I don't feel like just grabbing the 16-inch off my desk and taking it to a couch or a chair somewhere and really interacting with it. It's almost too big for that, really. And by the way, I'm really excited that I can get the same specs, basically, except for the battery life, in the 14-inch that I can in the 16-inch. I really appreciate that Apple, you know, did things that way instead of making you upgrade for the best possible experience outside of the battery and maybe some other tiny little details to get the 16. I can get it in the 14. So I like that, but it's basically the same thing I did with my iPhone this year. I got the 13 Pro and not the 13 Pro Max. I'd had the Max last year, the year before, and if I could have gotten the same specs in a smaller package, I would have, and I could do that this year, so I did. And I've really been just liking that, because if I want a bigger screen, I can go with my iPad. Now, the iPad is another arena where there's bigger and smaller. And you know what? My personal model for the last year has been the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, although I had an 11-inch review unit. And as I was testing those both out, I thought that I would really like that 12.9-inch, and don't get me wrong, I really do, but I'm trending towards wanting smaller stuff if it's gonna be portable. Of course, all of this is just personal preference, but across the board, for all the Apple stuff, I've been finding myself wanting to downsize the actual physical footprint of stuff a little bit if I can, without sacrificing power. And it's just been great because Apple's been allowing that to be the case with these Pro models, and it's just so cool. So long story short, you know, as travel picks back up and I get back into the swing of things, and if events start happening, if everything doesn't go digital, I would like to bring a smaller thing with me. So the 14 inch is it's just gonna be perfect, I think. I did go into the store, I looked at things. I don't know about you, but for me, as I was looking at them in the store, in my head, I wanted the 14, but I saw the 16, and you know, the grass is almost always greener on the other side. So if I have the 14, I'm gonna want the 16. If I get the 16, I'm gonna want the 14. Like, I hate that. That's just how it goes. And hey, just real quick, if you're liking the vibe of this video, make sure to get subscribed. Of course, I'm gonna be reviewing this, talking about life with it, comparing it to my iPad Pro, and a bunch of other things. You know, Mac apps videos, if you're new around here, I do that a lot. So get subscribed if you don't wanna miss out. I'd love to have you. Now, about the battery life, a smaller laptop is going to physically be constrained with a smaller battery size. So I think it's rated at 3 hours less for battery life. And I don't know what the metric was, it's for web browsing or whatever, but you know, it gives you an idea. 3 hours less on the 14 than the 16. And I can live with that for the same reason that I've been talking about this whole video. Mostly, I'm just using it at my desk and I've got a plug right there. It's just no big deal. But the battery life looks so insane here anyways, based on other videos and things, that I don't think I'm gonna complain at all compared to my old 16 inch. Now, a quick word about the Max versus the Pro. I don't wanna hit this too hard because I did make a whole video which people have really enjoyed, so I'll try to link that up down below if you're trying to decide which one is right for you. Honestly, just very honestly, I think the Max is way overkill for what I'm doing. So why would I be interested in getting it? Well, look, I'm not editing multiple streams of 8K video at this point. But as I do progress and upgrade my stuff, I want this machine to be able to handle not just my current workload, but my future workload to the best of its ability. Because I don't know, in a year and a half or something, I'm still gonna have this. I tend to upgrade maybe every 3 years, 3 or 4 years for my MacBooks. I don't know what I'm gonna be using. Maybe I am gonna have a different crazy camera setup. So I want it to be able to handle my future workload, whatever it is, to the best of its ability. Now, on the storage front, I'm going to be shooting for 4 terabytes of storage. I would love to get 8. Now, for a lot of people, 4 terabytes seems like overkill, seems ridiculous. Why don't you just plug in an external drive? And why would you ever want 8? Well, my video projects right now, I have 4 terabytes on my current MacBook Pro. And that holds about 2 video projects for me without having to hook up my external drive. And I do have an external drive on the desk. It's not an SSD. So that means if I try to edit a project off of that, it's ridiculously slow compared to the SSD storage on my actual MacBook itself, the Pro. SSD storage is just expensive. It is. It's more than something with a spinning disk. And so Apple storage is extra expensive. It's just one of the areas that if you upgrade, it's going to make your MacBook Pro jump up in the price more than other areas that you might upgrade. However, I've gotten more than just used to. I've gotten basically addicted to editing off of an SSD drive and not having to take a portable drive with me. So, you know, for the longest time, I used this orange LaCie drive that came with me. It was rugged and, you know, it wasn't a big deal at the time. It was like, hey, this is cool that I can even do this. But I would never want to go back to doing that, bringing that, for instance, on the plane when I do some editing after an event or something, or just to the coffee shop or wherever, or just on my desk. I don't want it laying around. It's just so much nicer. It's a luxury for sure. It's not a must-have, but it's so nice to have, to not have to hook up an external drive. But also, I didn't want to pay an extra $1,000, but I didn't really have to upgrade to 8 terabytes. I'd love to have it. It's just, for me personally, where I'm at with my workflow and everything, I don't really need it. So I don't know, that seemed like a little too extra for right now. And then there's the display. The screen is extra worth it for me on these MacBook Pros. It's just such a nice display. And if again, I'm not really getting into HDR content right now. I would love to, you know, like the iPhones shoot HDR and it looks amazing. When you're scrolling through on an iPhone and you're like picture, and then an HDR video hits when you're scrolling through your Photos app, it's just like, poof, it's so bright. It's just like otherworldly. It's so good. But I can't upload that native format to YouTube right now, which is basically where I publish mostly. So it's kind of pointless for me to even work in that format. And I haven't been, you know, I got the A7S III. I could do some HDR. I just haven't at the moment. I haven't felt that that was necessary. So if I get into that, I'm definitely going to want this amazing screen to be working on. But there's just other little practical things for probably every job out there where this nice screen comes in handy, aside from just looking really good or enabling HDR stuff. For instance, when I take a screenshot on this screen and I drop it into a video, I notice a huge difference versus screenshots taken on my iPad. Why? Because it's so nice, it's so dense, I can really crop in and keep things looking really sharp, or do like a Ken Burns zoom effect, and it doesn't get pixely as it zooms in because it's taken on such a nice screen, the screenshot. Versus on the iPad, you know, I don't have as much leeway, not as much room to play around with. So that's a little bit about why I'm getting this MacBook Pro. And it took me a little bit to even make this video about ordering it, because I've been really busy lately putting together a new project that's gonna be launching in January. And I talked a little bit about that in the last video, how to be successful without being lucky. So you can go back and watch that if you want a few more details and get signed up for the early list to be notified when that launches. But I do just want to talk a little bit about my desk, the state of my desk, and how I'm working right now, and how I plan to integrate this MacBook Pro. It used to be that, you know, the desk was just ruled by my MacBook Pro over the last half decade or more. You know, like when I was at the desk, that was my MacBook Pro's territory, its domain, its area. And then when I went somewhere else, often when I was gonna be portable, I just wanna do something on the couch, you know, type on the couch, respond to some emails or do some surfing, that was iPad territory. But that's not really how things have been lately. Oftentimes, my MacBook has just been for when I'm doing serious video editing or some photo editing. And my iPad is like my go-to for almost everything else because I just love it. The iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard, I made so many videos about this. It's just been so fun to use, so quick to get into. I've just got it dialed in with my apps, with my widgets. It's just become my go-to for almost all other types of work outside of my professional video editing. Really though, I guess for me, it's just Final Cut Pro. That's why I'm buying this MacBook Pro, is for Final Cut Pro. And I'm okay with that. It makes me money to do that. And this is my favorite way to edit. LumaFusion on the iPad Pro is really progressing. I just haven't spent enough time with it. If the stabilizer feature would hit, I know that's been in beta, it's been in test for a while. That's kind of one of the last things that I would want or need before I could really get serious about editing in LumaFusion. So maybe that's even out by now, but I want to keep the tradition alive though, where I compare the MacBook Pro versus the iPad Pro. I've done many MacBook Pro versus iPad Pro videos over the years. And what I really like about this particular Mac, like I've said a few times before, is that it feels like it's really starting to differentiate itself from the iPad Pro lineup now. In the past, it was like, well, should I get an iPad Pro or a MacBook Pro? And the conversation really seemed to center on why doesn't the iPad Pro get this and that and this MacBook feature? Because it seems like they could, and it's just arbitrary that Apple's not. And also made a whole video about that. But now with these new chips, the MacBook Pro has reclaimed its crown as just workhorse champion. Just if you need to do super intensive professional work, Hollywood level, you know, just it doesn't get any better than the MacBook Pro. And we're back to the era where the MacBook Pro is really its own thing. And the iPad Pro can't really touch it. And it's just the best iPad once again. And the whole lineup is just making a whole lot more sense now with the introduction of the M1 Pro and Max chips for the MacBook Pros. So I'm really excited. So this is the machine that I'm getting. It clocks in at under $5,000. And I think really the difference between getting the two different chips is only like $200, and the two different screen sizes is only another couple $100. So monetarily, it's not a huge difference in what you're paying if you don't get the bigger. It's not like you're saving a whole lot of money. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss my actual review and everything. Don't forget you can follow @DailyTech, spelled Daily Tekk on Instagram and Twitter, and stay tuned for more content. I'll catch up with you guys later.